My sibling forged my grandmother's will. But the expert proved it. The manila envelope felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hands as I sat in the law office, staring at the words that would change everything. My grandmother's will, or what my brother Marcus claimed was her will, lay spread across the mahogany table like evidence at a crime scene. I don't understand, I whispered to Mr. Henderson, the family attorney who'd known our grandmother Elena for 30 years. She promised me the house. She always said the house would be mine. Marcus shifted in his chair across from me, his expensive suit rustling. At 34, he'd always been the golden child, the successful investment banker, the one who moved to Manhattan and sent Christmas cards instead of visiting. Now he was leaning back with that smug expression I remembered from childhood, the one that said he'd won another game I didn't even know we were playing. Well, Sarah, people change their minds, he said, straightening his tie. Especially elderly people. Grandma Elena obviously reconsidered in her final months. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart. The Victorian house on Maple Street wasn't just property, it was home. After Mom and Dad died in that car accident when I was 8, Grandma Elena had raised me in that house. Every creaky floorboard, every faded wallpaper rose, every sunset through the kitchen window was woven into my DNA. Marcus had visited maybe 6 times in 20 years. According to this document, Mr. Henderson said carefully, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, the property at 847 Maple Street, valued at approximately $340,000, goes entirely to Marcus. Sarah, you're left with her jewelry collection and personal effects, estimated at around $15,000. The numbers felt surreal. Marcus would get the house where I still lived, where I planned to raise my own family someday. Where Grandma Elena had taught me to bake her famous apple strudel and where she'd helped me practice my teaching lessons at the kitchen table just months before the cancer took her in March. When exactly was this will created? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Mr. Henderson flipped through the pages. Dated February 18, 2024. About 6 weeks before Elena passed. I did the math quickly. February 18th was a Sunday. I remembered that weekend clearly because it was President's Day weekend, and I'd spent the entire 3 days at the house, helping Grandma Elena organize her medications. She'd been so weak by then, barely able to hold a coffee cup without shaking. That's impossible, I said. She could barely sign her name on birthday cards by then. Her arthritis was so bad, and the chemotherapy had made her hands shake constantly. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. She had good days and bad days, Sarah. Don't be dramatic. But I was remembering something else. The signature at the bottom of the will, Elena Rosewood written in confident, flowing script, looked nothing like the trembling signature she'd managed on my birthday card just 3 days later. I'd kept that card in my purse, and now I fumbled for it, comparing the two signatures side by side. The difference was like comparing a calligraphy sample to a child's first attempt at cursive. Mr. Henderson, I said slowly, I think we need to talk about getting this document examined by an expert. Marcus's face went pale, and in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that my brother had just declared war on everything our grandmother held sacred. The silence that followed my suggestion stretched like a taut wire about to snap. Marcus recovered quickly, he'd always been good at that, but not before I caught the flash of panic in his eyes. An expert examination seems unnecessary, he said, forcing a laugh. Are you seriously going to put our family through expensive legal battles based on your feelings? Grandma Elena made her choice, Sarah. Accept it with some dignity. Dignity? The word came out sharper than I intended. You want to talk about dignity, Marcus? You visited her exactly twice during her entire cancer treatment. Twice. I was there every single day after school, driving her to appointments, sleeping on her couch when she was too sick to be alone. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we should all take a moment to. No, I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. I want this will examined. I have the right to contest it, don't I? The attorney nodded slowly. You do have that right, Sarah. If you have reasonable grounds to suspect. She doesn't have grounds for anything, Marcus snapped, his composure finally cracking. This is exactly why Grandma changed her mind about you, Sarah. You were always so possessive, so clingy. Maybe she got tired of your constant hovering. The cruelty of his words hit like a physical blow. But instead of tears, I felt something else rising in my chest, a cold, determined fury that reminded me of Grandma Elena herself when someone tried to take advantage of her kindness. Where were you on February 18th, Marcus? I asked quietly. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Where were you? He loosened his tie, and I noticed a slight tremor in his hands. I don't have to account for my whereabouts to you, Sarah. This is ridiculous. But I was already thinking, remembering. February 18th had been the Sunday of President's Day weekend. I'd been at the house, yes, but I'd also gone home that evening because I had lesson plans to prepare. Grandma had been exhausted from her treatment, sleeping most of the afternoon. I'm going to call Dr. Martinez, I said, pulling out my phone. Grandma's oncologist. He kept detailed records of her condition, her medication schedules, her motor function assessments. You can't just call her doctor, Marcus protested. There are privacy laws. I was her medical proxy, I said calmly. I have copies of all her records at home, including the occupational therapy reports about her hand tremors and decreased fine motor control. Mr. Henderson was taking notes now, his expression growing more serious. Sarah, if you're genuinely concerned about the authenticity of this document, I can recommend several qualified handwriting experts and forensic document analysts. However, I should warn you that such examinations are expensive, typically $3,000 to $5,000, and if your challenge is unsuccessful, you might be responsible for court costs. I thought about my teacher's salary, my modest savings account. $5,000 would wipe out most of my emergency fund. But then I looked at Marcus, who was now scrolling through his phone with aggressive swipes, refusing to meet my eyes. Do it, I said. Set up the examination. Sarah, be reasonable, Marcus said, finally looking up. Even if you waste your money on this wild goose chase, what makes you think? Because I know Grandma Elena, I cut him off. And more importantly, I know you. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees, and I realized there was no going back now. Mr. Henderson promised to have the documents ready for examination by the end of the week, and Marcus stormed out of the office without another word. I sat in my car in the parking garage afterward, hands shaking as I called in sick for the next day. There was no way I could face my third graders while my entire world was crumbling. That evening, I spread Grandma Elena's medical records across my kitchen table like puzzle pieces. Dr. Martinez's notes painted a clear picture of her declining condition through January and February. Patient reports increased difficulty with fine motor tasks. Signature required assistance during consent forms. Recommend occupational therapy for hand tremors. But it was the notation from February 15th, just 3 days before the alleged will signing, that made my blood run cold. Patient unable to complete writing assessment due to severe hand tremors and joint pain. Prescribed increased pain medication. I photographed every relevant page, then called my best friend Jessica, who worked as a paralegal downtown. Jess, I need a favor. Can you recommend the best document examiner in the city? Money's not exactly an object anymore. Jesus, Sarah, what's going on? She listened as I explained everything, occasionally muttering, "That bastard," under her breath. Okay, here's what you need to do. There's a woman named Dr. Patricia Caldwell. She testified in that big insurance fraud case last year. She's expensive as hell, but she's the kind of expert who makes judges pay attention. The next morning, I called Dr. Caldwell's office and somehow managed to secure an appointment for that afternoon. Her office was in a sleek downtown building, nothing like the cozy legal office where our family drama had unfolded. Dr. Caldwell was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who studied the will with the intensity of a surgeon. Tell me about your grandmother's handwriting, she said, spreading out the samples I'd brought, birthday cards, grocery lists, the shaky signature from late February that looked nothing like the confident script on the will. She was always proud of her penmanship, I explained. She taught elementary school for 35 years before retiring. But the cancer treatments, the arthritis, by February, she could barely hold a pen. Dr. Caldwell nodded, examining the documents under a magnifying lamp. I'm seeing some very interesting inconsistencies here. The pressure variations, the letter formations, this signature on the will shows characteristics of someone practicing another person's handwriting. She looked up at me seriously. I'll need to run spectral analysis on the ink, examine paper fibers, check for indentations. The full examination will take about 2 weeks and cost $4,200. I wrote the check before I could change my mind. That weekend, I drove to Grandma Elena's house, my house, if the Real will was what I thought it was. I still had keys, though now I wondered how long that would last. Walking through the rooms felt like visiting a crime scene. In her bedroom, I found her personal phone book and started calling her friends, the women she played bridge with every Thursday for 20 years. February 18th, said Mrs. Patterson, who lived 2 streets over. Oh honey, I remember that day perfectly. Elena was supposed to come to my granddaughter's birthday party that afternoon, but she called around noon saying she was too sick, could barely get out of bed. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I called 3 more friends, and the story was the same. Grandma Elena had been bedridden that entire weekend, too weak even for phone calls. Marcus had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed I wouldn't fight back. But he'd forgotten that Grandma Elena had raised me to be just as stubborn as she was. 2 weeks later, Dr. Caldwell called me at school during my lunch break. I stepped into the empty hallway, my heart hammering as I answered. Sarah, I have the results of the document analysis, she said, her voice professional but with an undertone of excitement. You were absolutely right to be suspicious. I slumped against the lockers, relief flooding through me. It's forged. Not just forged, poorly forged. The signature on the will was written by someone attempting to imitate your grandmother's handwriting, but they used a different type of pen entirely. The will was signed with a Pilot G2 gel pen, while all your grandmother's authentic samples were written with her preferred Bic ballpoint. The ink composition is completely different under spectral analysis. My hands were shaking as I took notes. What else did you find? The pressure patterns are all wrong. Whoever signed this was healthy, confident, you can see it in the firm downstrokes and consistent letter spacing. Your grandmother's authentic signatures from the same time period show the tremor patterns and hesitation marks consistent with her medical condition. There's also something interesting about the paper itself. What about the paper? The will was supposedly drafted by Henderson and Associates, but the watermark is from a different legal supply company, one that Mr. Henderson's office has never used, according to his secretary. I called to verify. They've used the same supplier for 15 years. I felt like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle were finally clicking together. So Marcus created this himself. But how did he know what format to use, what legal language? That's where it gets interesting. The language is almost identical to your grandmother's previous will from 2019, the one that left everything to you. Someone simply swapped the names and changed a few details. My breath caught. How would Marcus have gotten a copy of the old will? That's a question for your attorney, but Sarah, there's one more thing. I found indentation marks on the back of the signature page. It appears someone practiced the signature multiple times on a piece of paper that was sitting on top of this document. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period, but I couldn't move. Dr. Caldwell, how strong is this evidence in court? Very strong. I've testified in over 200 cases, and I've rarely seen forgery this obvious once you know what to look for. Your brother was either very arrogant or very desperate. That evening, I sat in Mr. Henderson's office again, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Dr. Caldwell's 40-page report lay between us like a loaded weapon. This is quite damning, Mr. Henderson said, studying the analysis. Sarah, I owe you an apology. I should have caught some of these inconsistencies myself. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. The question now is how you want to proceed. We can contest the will in probate court, but given this evidence, I think we should also consider involving the district attorney's office. Criminal charges. The thought hadn't fully occurred to me. Forgery of a legal document, fraud, potentially elder abuse if we can prove he coerced your grandmother in any way before her death. These are serious felonies, Sarah. Marcus could face significant prison time. I thought about my brother's smug expression 2 weeks ago, his cruel words about me being clingy and possessive. Then I thought about Grandma Elena, too weak to attend a child's birthday party, supposedly signing away her life's most precious possession. I want to call the police, I said quietly. But first, I want to confront Marcus. I want to give him one chance to admit what he did and make this right. Mr. Henderson frowned. That could be risky. If he knows you have evidence. He might destroy other documents, I know. But he's still my brother. The words felt strange in my mouth. Maybe he'll surprise me. Even as I said it, I knew Marcus wouldn't surprise me at all. I called Marcus that night, my hand surprisingly steady as I dialed his number. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice cautious. Sarah. It's kind of late. We need to talk, I said. Tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock at Grandma Elena's house. Look, if this is about the will again. It's about the will. Be there, Marcus. Trust me, you want to hear what I have to say before anyone else does. The line went quiet for a long moment. What's that supposed to mean? 7 o'clock, I repeated, and hung up. The next day crawled by like torture. I taught my lessons on autopilot, my mind churning through different scenarios. Part of me, the part that remembered Marcus teaching me to ride a bike when I was 6, hoped he'd break down and confess everything. The larger part knew better. At 6:45, I was already sitting at Grandma Elena's kitchen table when I heard Marcus's BMW pull into the driveway. Through the window, I watched him sit in the car for nearly 5 minutes before finally getting out. He looked smaller somehow, older than his 34 years. You could have met me somewhere neutral, he said as I let him in. Being here feels. Feels like what? Like you're trespassing. I gestured to the living room, but he remained standing in the doorway, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. Just say whatever you need to say, Sarah. I pulled Dr. Caldwell's report from the manila envelope on the counter, watching his face carefully. A forensic handwriting expert examined Grandma's will. Want to guess what she found? Marcus's expression didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. You actually went through with that. Jesus, Sarah, how much money did you waste on? Pilot G2 gel pen, I interrupted. That's what you used to forge her signature. Grandma Elena only ever used Bic ballpoint pens, the same brand for 15 years. Dr. Caldwell has samples dating back to 2018. Now his face went pale. That doesn't prove anything. People use different pens. The watermark on the legal paper doesn't match Henderson and Associates supplier. You bought that paper somewhere else and tried to make it look official. I flipped through the report's pages. Then there's the pressure analysis. Whoever signed that will had steady hands and confident motor control. Grandma Elena couldn't even hold a coffee cup without shaking in February. Marcus pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down heavily. For a moment, the mask slipped completely, and I saw something that might have been shame flicker across his face. How? I asked quietly. How did you even get a copy of her old will to work from? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, she gave me a copy in 2020, when she was first diagnosed. Said she wanted me to understand what her wishes were, in case something happened during surgery. The betrayal hit fresh and sharp. Grandma Elena had trusted him with that information, and he'd used it as a template for theft. Marcus, she was dying. She was barely conscious most days by February. How could you? She was going to change it anyway. The words exploded out of him. Don't you think I know how much she loved you? Her precious Sarah who never left home, never built a real life. You were 30 years old and still living like her little girl. I was taking care of her. You were hiding from the real world. He stood up, pacing to the window. Do you know what that house is worth, Sarah? What the whole estate is worth? You were going to inherit over $500,000 for what, making soup and watching TV with an old woman. The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking, but underneath it I heard something else. Desperation. Marcus, are you in some kind of trouble? Do you need money? He laughed bitterly. Need money? Sarah, I've needed money for 2 years. Bad investments, margin calls, I'm leveraged up to my eyeballs. My house is in foreclosure. Jessica's threatening divorce if I don't figure something out. The pieces suddenly clicked together with sickening clarity. This wasn't just greed, it was desperation masked as entitlement. So you decided to steal from a dying woman. He turned back to me, and his expression was cold again. Prove it. I stared at him across Grandma Elena's kitchen, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. His challenge hung in the air, prove it, but we both knew I already had. I don't have to prove anything, Marcus. Dr. Caldwell's report does that for me. I tapped the thick document on the table. 43 pages of evidence that you forged Grandma's will. Spectral ink analysis, pressure pattern studies, paper composition, it's all here. His jaw worked silently, and I could practically see him calculating his options. Finally, he sat back down, running both hands through his hair. What do you want? He asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. I'd expected more denials, more attempts to justify what he'd done. This felt almost like surrender. I want you to admit it, I said. I want you to tell Mr. Henderson that you forged the will, and I want you to sign whatever paperwork is needed to transfer the property back to me, the way Grandma Elena actually intended. And then what? You'll just forget this happened. We'll go back to being a happy family. The bitterness in his voice made me realize how naive I'd been to think this conversation could fix anything. But I pressed on. I want you to get help, Marcus. Real help. For whatever financial mess you're in, for whatever made you think this was okay. He laughed harshly. Help. Sarah, I owe $180,000 to 3 different creditors. My wife doesn't even know about the second mortgage I took out on our house. You think therapy is going to solve that? So you thought stealing from Grandma would? I thought she owed me something. The words came out like a roar, and he slammed his fist on the table hard enough to make the salt and pepper shakers jump. 20 years, Sarah. 20 years of you being the perfect granddaughter while I was building a real career, making something of myself. And what did I get? Christmas cards with $50 checks while you got unconditional love in a Victorian mansion. I felt tears pricking at my eyes, but not from sadness, from anger. She sent you $50 because that's all the contact you wanted with her. You made your choice, Marcus. You chose Manhattan and your investment banker lifestyle over family. And you chose to be a 30-year-old teacher still living in your childhood bedroom. I chose to be there when she needed me. I shot back. I chose to hold her hand during chemotherapy while you were too busy to even call. I chose to love her more than I loved my own convenience. Marcus deflated slightly, his shoulders sagging. It doesn't matter now anyway. What do you mean? He pulled out his phone and showed me an email notification. Henderson's office. They want to meet tomorrow morning. Something about irregularities in the probate process and potential involvement of law enforcement. He looked up at me with something that might have been respect. You didn't wait for this conversation, did you? You already went to the police. I shook my head. Not yet. But Mr. Henderson said he was legally obligated to report suspected fraud. This isn't just about family anymore, Marcus. You committed a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. He set his phone down with exaggerated care. Forgery, fraud, probably a few other things the DA will think of. You know what the minimum sentence is for document fraud over $100,000? My stomach dropped. I hadn't actually researched the legal consequences. I'd been focused on proving the forgery, not punishing it. How long? I whispered. 3 to 7 years. More if they can prove I planned it in advance. He gave me a look that was almost admiring. That medical record timeline you probably gave them. That's going to show premeditation. I knew her condition was deteriorating, and I forged the will anyway. The weight of what I'd set in motion suddenly hit me. My brother, the same person who taught me to tie my shoes and helped me build blanket forts, was going to prison because of evidence I'd gathered. Marcus, I started, but he held up a hand. Don't you dare feel sorry for me now, Sarah. We both know I did this to myself. He stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where we played as children during summer visits. For what it's worth, he said without turning around, she really did love you more. And maybe that wasn't entirely unfair. The morning of Marcus's meeting with Mr. Henderson, I called in sick again and drove aimlessly around town, my phone buzzing with updates I wasn't ready to hear. At 11:47 a.m., Mr. Henderson called. Sarah, we need to talk. Can you come in this afternoon? Did Marcus show up? He did. With his attorney, Patricia Vance from Morrison and Associates. Very expensive firm. Mr. Henderson's tone was carefully neutral. There have been some developments. I was in his office by 2 p.m., my stomach churning with anxiety. Mr. Henderson looked exhausted, his usually perfect tie slightly askew. Marcus has admitted to forging the will, he said without preamble. His attorney advised against it, but he insisted on making a full confession. However, there's something else you need to know. He pulled out a second manila envelope, this one much thinner than Dr. Caldwell's report. Yesterday evening, after your meeting with Marcus, he called me. He wanted to make sure we had all the relevant documents for our investigation. What kind of documents? Sarah, your grandmother did change her will in February. Not on the 18th, that document is definitely forged. But on February 12th, she dictated changes to me over the phone. I drove out to her house that afternoon to make it official. The room started spinning slightly. What kind of changes? Mr. Henderson opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of legal paper. She wanted to add a codicil, a modification to her existing will. The house was still supposed to go to you, but she wanted to make sure Marcus received something meaningful too. I stared at the document, trying to process what I was seeing. In Elena Rosewood's shaky but genuine handwriting was an addendum dated February 12, 2024. I leave my grandson Marcus my collection of first edition books and my late husband's coin collection, valued at approximately $65,000. He may not visit often, but he is still my grandson, and I want him to have something to remember me by. She knew, I whispered. She knew he was in financial trouble. Marcus called her on February 10th. Apparently, he broke down and told her everything, the debt, the possible divorce, the foreclosure. She was furious at first, but then, well, you know how she was. She wanted to help. My hands were shaking as I read the codicil again. So when Marcus forged the will to give himself the house, he erased the gift she actually intended for him. If he'd done nothing, he would have inherited $65,000 in collectibles. Instead, he committed multiple felonies trying to steal $340,000 more. The irony was staggering. Grandma Elena, even in her final weeks, had been thinking about both of us. She'd found a way to help Marcus while still honoring her promise to me about the house. And he destroyed that gift through his own greed and desperation. There's more, Mr. Henderson continued. The DA's office has decided to pursue charges. Marcus will be arrested tomorrow morning. His attorney is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but given the amount involved, he's definitely going to prison. Most likely, yes. 18 months to 3 years, if he accepts the plea. Much longer if he fights it and loses. I thought about Marcus sitting in Grandma Elena's kitchen last night, calculating the years he'd face. He'd known this was coming, had probably known since the moment I mentioned Dr. Caldwell's name. Mr. Henderson, I said slowly, is there any way to reduce the charges? If I spoke to the DA, told them I didn't want to prosecute. He shook his head grimly. The state is prosecuting this as fraud against an elderly person, not just theft from you. Once I reported it, it became a matter of public interest. Your wishes matter, but they won't determine the outcome. I walked out of his office with 2 envelopes, Dr. Caldwell's damning forensic report and the codicil that proved Grandma Elena had loved us both, right until the end. Tomorrow, Marcus would be arrested for stealing an inheritance he'd already been given in a different form. And somehow, that made everything so much worse. That evening, I couldn't bring myself to go home to my apartment. Instead, I drove to Grandma Elena's house and let myself in with keys that might not be mine much longer. The silence felt different now, not peaceful, but heavy with the weight of everything that had been destroyed. I was sitting in her rocking chair, staring at the codicil for the 100th time, when my phone rang. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. Sarah, turn on Channel 7 News. Now. My stomach dropped as I fumbled for the remote. The 10 o'clock broadcast was just starting, and the lead story made my blood freeze. Investment banker Marcus Whitmore was arrested this morning on charges of elder fraud and document forgery, the anchor announced over a photo of Marcus in handcuffs being led from his Manhattan apartment building. Sources say Whitmore allegedly forged his deceased grandmother's will, attempting to steal over $300,000 in property from his younger sister. The camera cut to a reporter standing outside Henderson and Associates. This case highlights the growing problem of financial elder abuse, with family members targeting vulnerable seniors for their assets. If convicted, Whitmore faces up to 7 years in prison. Then they showed his mugshot. Marcus looked hollow-eyed and defeated, nothing like the confident man in expensive suits who'd sat across from me just 2 weeks ago. Jesus Christ, Sarah, Jessica breathed through the phone. This is insane. Are you okay? I don't know, I whispered, clicking off the TV. Jess, his wife Jessica, she didn't know about any of this. His financial problems, the second mortgage, none of it. Can you imagine finding out your husband is a felon by watching the evening news? That's not your fault. Isn't it? I could have handled this privately, worked something out. He forged a dying woman's will, Sarah. Your grandmother. There's no working that out privately. But as I hung up and sat in the growing darkness of Grandma Elena's living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd somehow failed everyone, Marcus, his family, maybe even Grandma Elena herself. The next morning brought a call I hadn't expected. Patricia Vance, Marcus's attorney, wanted to meet. My client would like to speak with you, she said in a crisp, professional tone. Before his arraignment this afternoon. He's being held at the county jail, but I can arrange a meeting at my office if you prefer. What does he want to say? That's between you and him, Ms. Chen. But I will say this, he's received several offers from reporters wanting to buy his story. So far, he's refused them all. The implication hung in the air. Marcus could make this much worse for me if he wanted to, paint me as vindictive, turn this into a public family feud. The fact that he hadn't suggested he still had some boundaries left. I agreed to meet him at the attorney's office at 1 p.m. Patricia Vance's conference room was all glass and chrome, a far cry from Mr. Henderson's cozy traditional office. Marcus was already there when I arrived, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made his skin look sallow. His hands were cuffed to a chain around his waist. You look like hell, I said, sitting across from him. Feel worse. His voice was hoarse. Sarah, I need you to know, Jessica filed for divorce this morning. She's taking Emma and moving back to her mother's in Portland. Emma. His 8-year-old daughter who called me Aunt Sarah and sent me crayon drawings of flowers. Another casualty of his choices. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I also need you to know that Channel 7 got it wrong. The police didn't arrest me, I turned myself in. That surprised me. Why? Marcus looked down at his shackled hands. Because Grandma Elena would have wanted me to face what I did. And because you deserved better than having a criminal for a brother. The words hit me like a physical blow. Whatever anger I'd been carrying toward Marcus started to crack around the edges, replaced by something more complicated and painful. The arraignment is in 2 hours, he continued. Patricia thinks she can get the DA down to 18 months if I plead guilty to all charges. No trial, no media circus. What do you want from me, Marcus? He met my eyes for the first time since I'd arrived. I want you to take the plea deal they're offering you. I stared at him. What plea deal? Patricia Vance cleared her throat. The DA's office contacted us this morning. They're prepared to offer you a restitution agreement. If you're willing to accept $50,000 in damages and write a victim impact statement supporting a reduced sentence, they'll recommend the minimum 18 months. And if I don't? Then Marcus faces the full 7 years, and this case goes to trial. Which means months of testimony, media coverage, and your entire family history being dissected in open court. My head was spinning. Marcus, that 50,000, where would it even come from? You said you were broke. The book collection and coin collection from Grandma's codicil, I'm signing them over to you, and Patricia found a collector willing to pay cash. You'd get what Grandma wanted you to have, plus compensation for what I put you through. It was a neat solution, wrapped in a bow. Too neat. What's the catch? I asked. Patricia leaned forward. The victim impact statement would need to emphasize that this was a family dispute that got out of hand, not a calculated attack on an elderly person. It would help contextualize Marcus's actions for the judge. You want me to lie? I want you to tell the truth, Marcus said urgently. That I was desperate and stupid, but not evil. That I loved Grandma Elena even if I showed it badly. That destroying our family wasn't worth 7 years in prison. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by prison orange. His confident demeanor had cracked completely. But underneath it all, he was still the person who taught me to ride a bike, who'd held my hand at our parents' funeral when I was 8 and he was 14. I need time to think, I said. Sarah, the arraignment is. I said I need time. Patricia walked me to the elevator, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Ms. Chen, I know this is difficult. But you should understand that if this goes to trial, the defense will have to present Marcus's side of the story. Including his perception that your grandmother favored you unfairly, that you isolated her from other family members. The threat was delivered with professional courtesy, but it was still a threat. They'd paint me as manipulative, possessive, exactly what Marcus had accused me of in Grandma's kitchen. How long do I have to decide? The DA wants an answer by 5 p.m. tomorrow. After that, they withdraw the offer. I drove home in a daze, Patricia's business card burning a hole in my purse. At a red light, I called Mr. Henderson. Sarah, where are you? I've been trying to reach you all morning. There's been another development. What kind of development? Emma Caldwell, Dr. Patricia Caldwell, the handwriting expert, she received a call this morning from someone claiming to be a journalist. They offered her $10,000 for copies of her analysis and her personal opinion on the case. My blood went cold. Did she take it? No, but Sarah, the caller knew details about the forgery that haven't been made public. Specific details from her report. Someone leaked information about this case, and now the media is digging deeper. How much deeper? They're looking into your grandmother's medical records, your family's financial history, Marcus's business dealings. By tomorrow, this could be front-page news across the state. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in the car, engine running, trying to process everything. The plea deal wasn't just about reducing Marcus's sentence anymore, it was about containing a scandal that threatened to consume what was left of our family's privacy. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Chen, this is David Park from the Herald Tribune. I'd like to discuss your brother's case and your grandmother's medical condition in her final months. Very interested in your side of the story. $15,000 for exclusive interview. The vultures were circling, and I had 29 hours to decide whether to feed them or try to fly away. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with 3 business cards spread in front of me like tarot cards predicting different futures. Patricia Vance's sleek corporate card, David Park's hastily scribbled contact information, and Dr. Caldwell's original forensic analysis business card. Each represented a different path forward, and none of them felt right. My phone had been buzzing constantly, reporters, distant relatives who'd seen the news, even a few of my students' parents asking if I was okay. I'd finally turned it off and unplugged my landline, but the silence felt almost worse than the chaos. At 9 p.m., someone knocked on my door. Through the peephole, I saw a woman about my age with tired eyes and a sleeping child in her arms. Jessica. I opened the door, shocked. Marcus's wife looked like she'd been crying for hours. I'm sorry to just show up, she whispered, shifting 8-year-old Emma higher on her shoulder. I didn't know where else to go. The reporters found our hotel, and Emma's been asking why Daddy's picture was on TV with the word arrested underneath. I ushered them inside, my heart breaking as I looked at Emma's tear-stained face. She'd been crying in her sleep, her cheeks were still damp. Jessica, I'm so sorry. I never wanted. Don't. She held up a hand as she settled Emma on my couch. This isn't your fault, Sarah. Marcus made his choices. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I brought her a cup of tea and waited. Patricia Vance told me about the plea deal they offered you. She thinks you're going to take it. Jessica's voice was barely above a whisper. Sarah, I need to know, is Marcus really as sorry as he claims, or is this just another manipulation? Because if I'm going to rebuild my life, if I'm going to explain to my daughter why her father is in prison, I need to know the truth. The weight of her question settled over me like lead. Jessica deserved honesty, but I wasn't sure I knew what the truth was anymore. He seemed genuinely remorseful, I said carefully. But Jessica, he forged a dying woman's signature. Even if he's sorry now, that level of deception took planning. I know. She stared into her tea. Sarah, there's something else. Something Patricia doesn't know I found. She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her purse, a printout of an email dated February 10th, 2 weeks before Grandma Elena died. I found this on Marcus's laptop yesterday, before I filed for divorce. It's from a real estate appraiser. My hands shook as I read the email. Marcus had requested a professional appraisal of 847 Maple Street on February 5th, a full week before he'd supposedly had his desperate phone call with Grandma Elena about his financial troubles. He was planning this before he even told her he needed help, I breathed. There's more. Jessica's voice was flat now, emotionless. I found browser history showing he'd researched contesting elderly wills and handwriting analysis detection starting in January. He knew exactly how to avoid getting caught, he just didn't count on you fighting back. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Marcus's tearful confession about his desperation, his claims that the forgery was a spur-of-the-moment decision born from panic, it was all lies. He'd been systematically planning to steal from our dying grandmother for weeks. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Jessica looked over at Emma, still sleeping fitfully on my couch. Because tomorrow you have to decide whether to help reduce his sentence. And I think you deserve to know exactly who you'd be helping. She stood up, gathering her purse. We're driving to Portland tonight. Emma starts school there on Monday. But Sarah, whatever you decide about that plea deal, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Don't let Marcus manipulate you one more time. After they left, I sat staring at the email printout until the words blurred together. Every conversation with Marcus over the past 2 weeks suddenly looked different through this lens. His confession, his apparent remorse, even turning himself in, had any of it been genuine, or was it all just damage control? At 11:30 p.m., I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and 1 voicemail from a number I recognized. Mr. Henderson, calling from his personal phone. Sarah, call me back immediately. There's been a development with the case. The DA wants to meet with you first thing tomorrow morning. It's urgent. My stomach clenched as I dialed his number, knowing that whatever had happened would make my decision about the plea deal infinitely more complicated. Mr. Henderson answered on the first ring, his voice tight with exhaustion. Sarah, thank God. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours. My phone was off. What's happened? The DA's office received an anonymous tip this evening. Someone sent them copies of Marcus's internet search history, the same information Jessica showed you, plus more. Much more. I sank into my kitchen chair, the email printout still spread in front of me. What kind of more? Sarah, Marcus didn't just research handwriting analysis. He researched your grandmother's specific medical condition, her medications, even contacted her pharmacy pretending to be concerned about drug interactions. The DA has phone records showing he called Mercy General's oncology department in January, claiming to be family and asking about typical progression timelines for her type of cancer. The room started spinning. He was tracking her decline. It gets worse. The anonymous tipster also provided bank records showing Marcus took out a $25,000 cash advance on February 8th, 4 days before your grandmother's real codicil, 10 days before his forged will. The DA thinks he was planning to flee the state if the forgery was discovered too quickly. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Mr. Henderson, who would have access to all this information? Jessica said she only found the real estate email on his laptop. That's what the DA wants to discuss with you tomorrow morning. Sarah, they think Marcus had an accomplice. Someone with access to financial records and phone systems that Jessica wouldn't have seen. The implication hit me like ice water. You think someone else was involved in forging the will? Or someone's been investigating Marcus independently and decided to make sure he gets the maximum sentence? Either way, this changes everything. The plea deal Patricia Vance offered you. It's off the table. The DA is treating this as organized fraud now, possibly involving identity theft and elder abuse conspiracy charges. I thought about Marcus in that orange jumpsuit, insisting he turned himself in out of remorse. Had that been another lie, or had he known the walls were closing in faster than he'd admitted? What does this mean for tomorrow's arraignment? It means Marcus is looking at federal charges now, not just state. We're talking 10 to 15 years minimum, possibly more if they can prove he had help accessing your grandmother's medical information illegally. After we hung up, I sat in my dark kitchen trying to piece together a puzzle that kept growing more complex. Someone had been watching Marcus, documenting his crimes in meticulous detail. But who? And why wait until now to come forward? At 1:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. The man you're trying to save planned your grandmother's death timeline like a business transaction. Some truths are worth more than family loyalty. Check your email. My blood went cold as I opened my laptop. A new message sat in my inbox, sender anonymous, subject line, what Marcus really did. The attached files made my stomach lurch. Screenshots of Marcus's browser history showing searches for accelerating cancer patient decline, signs of imminent death in elderly, and how long after will reading before property transfer. But it was the final document that made me run to the bathroom and vomit. A draft email from Marcus's account, never sent, dated February 14th. Elena's getting suspicious about my visits. Keeps asking why I'm suddenly so interested in her medical appointments. Need to move faster on the will situation before she changes her mind about the codicil too. The anonymous tipster had been wrong about one thing. Marcus hadn't just planned to steal from her grandmother. He'd been monitoring her dying process, calculating the optimal moment to strike. The woman who'd raised me, who'd loved us both despite our flaws, had been nothing more than a business opportunity to him. Tomorrow's meeting with the DA suddenly felt like a formality. Whatever plea deal they'd offered was irrelevant now. My brother wasn't just a desperate man who'd made terrible choices, he was a predator who'd stalked our grandmother in her final weeks. And someone wanted to make absolutely sure I knew it. The DA's office felt like a fortress at 8 a.m., all concrete and bulletproof glass. Detective Maria Santos met me at security, her badge glinting under the fluorescent lights as she escorted me through corridors that smelled of burnt coffee and desperation. Ms. Chen, I want to thank you for coming in so early, she said, her voice carrying a slight Boston accent. What we're about to show you is going to be difficult, but it's important you see everything before we proceed. District Attorney Rebecca Walsh was waiting in Conference Room C, surrounded by manila folders and a laptop displaying what looked like financial spreadsheets. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Sarah, sit down. We need to discuss the new evidence. She gestured to a chair across from her. The anonymous tip we received last night came with more than just browser history. Someone's been building a case against your brother for months. She opened the first folder, revealing bank statements highlighted in yellow. Marcus opened 3 separate accounts between December and February, all at different banks. Look at the deposit patterns. My eyes tracked the numbers, and my stomach dropped. December 15th, $3,400 deposit, memo line, Grandma Christmas money. January 8th, $2,200, memo, Elena medication reimbursement. February 3rd, $1,800, memo, Grandma grocery shopping. He was stealing from her while she was alive, I whispered. Small amounts, nothing she'd notice missing from her monthly pension. But Sarah, look at February 6th. Detective Santos pointed to a withdrawal. Marcus took out $8,000 cash from Elena's account using her debit card. We have security footage of him at the ATM on 5th Street. The room felt like it was closing in around me. How is that even possible? Grandma Elena never gave him her PIN number. DA Walsh pulled up a video file on her laptop. This is surveillance from Mercy General's parking garage, February 2nd. The grainy footage showed Marcus walking beside Grandma Elena's wheelchair as I pushed her toward the oncology building. But the camera angle caught something I hadn't seen that day, Marcus watching carefully as Grandma entered her PIN at the parking payment kiosk. He memorized her PIN from this visit, Detective Santos explained. Then used her card 5 times over the next 2 weeks. Your grandmother probably thought she was just forgetting her purchases. I remembered those days clearly now. Grandma Elena had seemed confused about her bank balance, mentioning that her account seemed lower than expected. I'd attributed it to the morphine making her foggy, had even balanced her checkbook myself to ease her worry. There's more, DA Walsh continued, opening another folder. The anonymous tipster provided phone records showing Marcus called Elena's doctor's office 6 times in January, always identifying himself as family helping with medication management. He was getting detailed updates about her prognosis, her pain levels, her estimated remaining time. The cruelty was breathtaking. While I'd been focused on making Grandma Elena comfortable, bringing her favorite books and helping with crossword puzzles, Marcus had been circling like a vulture, calculating exactly how much time he had left to maximize his theft. Who's your anonymous source? I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. The 2 women exchanged glances. That's what we need to discuss with you, DA Walsh said carefully. Because we think you know them. She turned the laptop toward me, showing an email timestamp from last night's tip, sent at 11:43 p.m. from the account, email protected. My heart stopped. That's Patricia Vance. Marcus's attorney. His former attorney, as of 2 hours ago, Detective Santos corrected. She withdrew from the case and turned over everything she'd found during her client investigation. Sarah, she wants to testify against him. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Patricia Vance, the woman who'd sat across from me yesterday threatening to paint me as manipulative if I didn't accept the plea deal, had been the one systematically destroying Marcus's defense. I don't understand, I managed. Yesterday she was trying to negotiate a reduced sentence. She wanted me to write a victim impact statement supporting 18 months instead of 7 years. DA Walsh leaned forward, her expression grim. That meeting was recorded, Sarah. Patricia was wearing a wire. The conference room suddenly felt airless. She was gathering evidence against her own client. Patricia Vance has been investigating Marcus since January 15th, Detective Santos explained, pulling out another thick folder. That's when Elena's bank first contacted their fraud department about unusual ATM activity. The bank security officer, David Chin. Wait. My head snapped up. David Chin. That's my uncle. My father's brother. Your uncle David has been monitoring Elena's accounts since her cancer diagnosis, watching for exactly this kind of elder financial abuse. When he spotted the irregular withdrawals, he contacted Patricia privately because he knew she specialized in estate fraud cases. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Uncle David, who'd barely spoken to our family since Dad's funeral 20 years ago, had been quietly protecting Grandma Elena from the shadows. And Patricia Vance hadn't been Marcus's attorney at all, she'd been building a criminal case against him. So yesterday's meeting. I started. Was Patricia's final evidence-gathering session. She needed Marcus to admit his guilt on record, and she needed to document any attempts to coerce you into minimizing his crimes. DA Walsh turned the laptop screen toward me again. Sarah, we have 47 minutes of recorded conversation from yesterday's meeting. Would you like to hear what Marcus said after you left? My hands were trembling as I nodded. The audio quality was crystal clear. Patricia's voice, professional and calm. Marcus, now that Sarah's gone, let's discuss your real options. The 18-month plea deal I mentioned. That was never real. The state is pursuing maximum sentences for elder abuse cases. Marcus's voice, panicked. What the hell are you talking about? You're my attorney. I was never your attorney. I've been working with the DA's office since January. Every conversation we've had has been recorded and documented as evidence. The sound of chairs scraping, Marcus's voice rising. This is entrapment. You can't. I can and I did. Marcus, you spent 2 months stalking a dying woman, stealing her money, and forging her final wishes. Did you really think no one was watching? DA Walsh paused the recording. It gets worse from there. Marcus made several threats against you, against Patricia, and against your Uncle David. That's why we're also adding intimidation charges to his case. I felt like I was drowning. What kind of threats? Detective Santos consulted her notes. He said, and I quote, Sarah has no idea how deep this goes. If she thinks she's getting that house, she's going to learn exactly what I'm capable of. He also mentioned having insurance against anyone who tried to destroy his family's reputation. What does that mean? What insurance? We're not sure yet. But Sarah, we think Marcus may have been documenting your grandmother's final weeks for reasons beyond just tracking her medical decline. Patricia found evidence that he'd been secretly recording conversations during his visits to Elena's house. My stomach lurched. Recording her. Audio and possibly video. We found receipts for surveillance equipment purchased in December, hidden in Marcus's car during his arrest. Small cameras, digital recording devices, equipment designed to be concealed in everyday objects. The violation felt complete now. Not only had Marcus stolen from Grandma Elena and forged her will, but he turned her final months into a surveillance operation, recording a dying woman without her knowledge or consent. We need to search the house on Maple Street, DA Walsh continued. With your permission, we'd like to bring in a technical team to sweep for hidden cameras and recording devices. Whatever Marcus captured, we need to find it before. She was interrupted by Detective Santos's radio crackling to life. All units, we have a break-in in progress at 847 Maple Street. Anonymous caller reports someone inside the residence, possible burglary in progress. The three of us stared at each other for a frozen moment before DA Walsh grabbed her keys. Sarah, it looks like Marcus's insurance policy just activated. We raced toward Maple Street in DA Walsh's unmarked sedan, Detective Santos coordinating with patrol units through her radio. My hands were clenched so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had gone white, my mind spinning with possibilities of what we might find. Unit 47, what's your status at 847 Maple Street? Santos barked into her radio. We've got the perimeter secured, but the suspect fled before we arrived. Front door was jimmied open, looks like they knew exactly what they were looking for. House has been tossed pretty thoroughly. My heart sank as we pulled into Grandma Elena's driveway. 2 police cruisers sat in front of the house, their red and blue lights painting the Victorian's white siding in alternating colors. The front door hung open like a wounded mouth, the antique lock mechanism dangling from splintered wood. Officer Martinez met us at the front steps, his notebook already filled with observations. Break-in occurred approximately 45 minutes ago. Neighbor across the street, Mrs. Patterson, called it in when she saw someone moving around inside with a flashlight. Mrs. Patterson, the same woman who told me Grandma Elena was too sick to attend her granddaughter's birthday party on February 18th. I made a mental note to thank her later for being so observant. Any description of the suspect? DA Walsh asked as we stepped carefully through the front door. White male, average height, wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap. Mrs. Patterson said he seemed to know the house layout, went straight upstairs, then down to the basement. Total time inside was maybe 20 minutes. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Couch cushions were scattered across the floor, Grandma Elena's china cabinet stood open with dishes pulled out and stacked haphazardly on the coffee table. But it wasn't random destruction, someone had been systematically searching for something specific. Sarah, can you tell us what might be missing? Detective Santos asked, pulling on latex gloves. I walked through the room slowly, my heart breaking with each new violation. In the kitchen, every drawer had been pulled out and rifled through. The basement showed signs of intense searching, storage boxes opened and their contents dumped, even the old coal bin had been disturbed. But it was Grandma Elena's bedroom that made my blood run cold. They found it, I whispered, staring at the empty space on her nightstand where her jewelry box used to sit. The jewelry box is missing. Officer Martinez asked, making notes. No, you don't understand. I pointed to tiny holes in the wallpaper behind where the jewelry box had been positioned. Marcus hid something back there. Look, those are screw holes from mounting brackets. DA Walsh called for the technical team while Detective Santos photographed the wall damage. Within an hour, 2 technicians arrived with equipment I'd only seen in movies, electronic scanners, UV lights, and devices that looked like sophisticated metal detectors. Sarah, we're finding traces of adhesive residue throughout the house, one technician reported. Whoever installed surveillance equipment here used professional-grade mounting systems. This wasn't amateur hour. They found evidence of cameras in 5 different locations: the living room, kitchen, Grandma Elena's bedroom, and surprisingly, the basement near her old desk where she used to pay bills. Tiny holes in walls, subtle marks on furniture, and adhesive residue that glowed under UV light. The bedroom camera was positioned to capture the entire bed and dresser area, the lead technician explained, his voice grim. Based on the mounting angle, it would have recorded everything: conversations, medication routines, any moments of confusion or weakness. I felt sick imagining Marcus reviewing footage of Grandma Elena's most vulnerable moments, calculating the optimal time to strike. But then Detective Santos called from the basement with a discovery that made everything exponentially worse. Sarah, you need to see this. We found Marcus's backup plan. In the basement, hidden behind a loose panel near the furnace, the technicians had discovered a small fireproof safe, empty now, but with fresh scratches around the lock mechanism indicating it had been recently opened. Based on the size and the mounting system, this safe contained the original recordings, Detective Santos explained. Whoever broke in knew exactly where to find them. DA Walsh's phone rang, and her expression grew increasingly grave as she listened. When she hung up, she looked directly at me. Sarah, Marcus made bail 20 minutes ago. Someone posted his $50,000 bond in cash. The timing wasn't coincidental. Someone had coordinated Marcus's release with a break-in at Grandma Elena's house, ensuring he could retrieve whatever evidence he'd been holding as his insurance policy. We need to find him, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Before he disappears with whatever was on those recordings. But even as I said it, I realized Marcus was likely already gone, along with whatever secrets he'd captured during Grandma Elena's final months. The question now was whether those recordings would surface as blackmail material, or something even worse. We didn't have to look far. Marcus was waiting in his BMW outside my apartment complex when Detective Santos dropped me off that evening, engine running like he was ready for a quick escape. But as I approached his car, I could see through the windshield that his hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He rolled down the window as I got closer. Get in, Sarah. We need to talk. I'm not going anywhere with you, I said, keeping my distance. Detective Santos was still parked across the street, watching. If you have something to say it here. Marcus held up a small digital device, a thumb drive. You want to know what my insurance policy was? 3 months of recordings from Grandma Elena's house. Every conversation, every private moment, every time you broke down crying when you thought she couldn't hear you. My stomach clenched, but I forced my voice to remain steady. What do you want, Marcus? I want my life back. I want you to call the DA and tell them you're not cooperating with the prosecution anymore. Family dispute, just like Patricia suggested. His eyes were bloodshot, desperate. Because if you don't, these recordings go public. Every local news station, every social media platform I can find. What's on them that you think would hurt me? Marcus's smile was cruel. January 23rd. You were helping Grandma with her medications, and she asked you about the will. Remember what you said? Don't worry about Marcus, Grandma. He made his choices. The house should go to someone who actually loves you. The memory hit like a slap. I'd been exhausted that night, frustrated by Marcus's absence during a particularly difficult chemo week. Grandma Elena had been worried about being fair to both of us, and I'd let my resentment show. Or February 8th, Marcus continued, when you told her that leaving Marcus anything was rewarding his selfishness. Should I keep going? Because I have hours of you poisoning our grandmother against me. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had I influenced Grandma Elena's decisions? Had my frustration with Marcus colored her final wishes? But then I remembered something else from those recordings he was describing. Grandma Elena's response to my January 23rd comment, Sarah, honey, I love you both. But love doesn't mean ignoring who people really are. Play the recordings, Marcus, I said, surprising him. Play all of them. Let everyone hear the whole truth. His confident expression faltered. Sarah, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You want people to hear me venting about your absence. Fine. Let them also hear Grandma Elena crying herself to sleep because her grandson only called when he needed something. Let them hear her asking me why you suddenly started visiting right after her terminal diagnosis. Marcus's face went pale. You can't prove. February 14th, I interrupted, remembering the draft email from the anonymous tip. That's when you realized Grandma was getting suspicious about your sudden interest in her medical appointments. What do you think those recordings captured from her end, Marcus? Detective Santos had gotten out of her car and was walking toward us, clearly sensing the tension escalating. Marcus Whitmore, she called out, step out of the vehicle please. I have rights. Marcus shouted, but his voice cracked. I posted bail legally. And you violated it by approaching a witness in your case, Santos replied calmly. Sarah, step away from the car. As Marcus was handcuffed for the second time in 24 hours, he looked at me with something that might have been regret. Those recordings, he said quietly. They're not going to make either of us look good. Maybe not, I said. But they'll show the truth. And Grandma Elena always said the truth was worth more than looking good. 2 weeks later, I sat in Grandma Elena's kitchen, my kitchen now, reading the final court documents. Marcus had accepted a plea deal for 7 years in federal prison after the recordings revealed the full scope of his manipulation. The thumb drive had contained not blackmail material, but evidence of his own crimes, recordings of him going through Grandma's financial documents while she slept, practicing her signature, even talking on the phone about timing her death properly. The house was quiet now, peaceful in a way it hadn't been since before Grandma Elena got sick. Uncle David had stopped by that morning to help me understand the banking documents, and we talked for 3 hours about Dad, about family, about the importance of protecting the people we love. Marcus's wife Jessica had sent a card from Portland. Emma had drawn a picture of Grandma Elena's house with a message, "Thank you for keeping Grandma's promises." It was sitting on the mantel now, next to Grandma Elena's photograph. The expert had proven the forgery, just like the title promised. But more than that, the truth had proven itself. Sometimes justice takes time, sometimes it requires courage, and sometimes it means accepting that protecting someone's memory is worth more than protecting family secrets. Grandma Elena's house was finally, truly mine. And I planned to fill it with the same love she'd shown me, the kind that sees people clearly and loves them anyway, but never at the expense of what's right.